So thank you for being here this morning. We're going to go over Stormwater 101. So it's just kind of a basics over the program and state regulations. So we're going to go over some program overview, delegation, plan review, inspection, the whole gamut of different responsibilities under the Conservation District. So as everyone in this room knows, in Delaware, you're never very far from water. When land is developed, the potential for impact is significant. This picture was actually just taken this weekend at a beach planting, but it's so appropriate because everywhere we look, we're very close to water, whether it's a ditch, tax ditch, waterway, stormwater facility. So anything that we're doing on the land, we can have an impact. So its state regulations were promulgated in 1991, and they were delegated to different agencies throughout Delaware. So DEMREC oversees our program at state regulations, and it's delegated to different agencies throughout the state. So in Newcastle, there's like the town of Middletown, Wilmington, Newcastle Conservation District, Newcastle County. So that's a little bit of a different animal. In Kent and Sussex, it's a little bit more simplified, where both KCD is responsible for everything in Kent County, including all the municipalities, and the same thing for Sussex. So we are responsible for overseeing compliance with the state sediment and stormwater regulations throughout the county, including all the municipalities. So we are very busy. Land disturbance over 5,000 square feet. So if you disturb 5,000 square feet or more, so just 50 by 100, whether you're building a house, a Walmart, some type of commercial development to a residential community, those plans are coming through our office. So when a plan is submitted to our office, well, actually, let me go over delegation responsibility. So our delegation responsibility, so the state delegates this responsibility to the Sussex Conservation District, and they have since 1991. And we are responsible for reviewing plans for compliance with state regulations. So whether, like I said, building a house to some type of commercial or residential development, those permits are coming through our office in different ways. So if it's just a single family house, that process is very simple. If it's a utility project, that process is simple. If it's a commercial or residential development or an industrial project, that process is much more complicated. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So we are also responsible for construction and inspection. So we inspect all of these projects until it's fully constructed. So if you're here in a residential community, our involvement in your community is until every home is constructed. So sometimes that, depending on the size of your community, that could be 2 years with the rate of construction that we have here locally, or that could be 20 years. But we are involved in inspecting your community, whether they're building a house or it's the initial bulk grading, site grading. We're involved in that project from day one until the very end. And then we also provide maintenance inspection of closed out projects. And that's why I think some of you are here today. You're representing an HOA, you're either in the transition process or you have already passed that. And you are on a committee and you're now responsible for stormwater maintenance in your development. We are still your technical resource. We are not experts like the others in the room here today. Some of our vendors that are here, they are experts really in using the chemicals, enhancing the stormwater facilities. I'm just going to go over what is required in the regulations. We also provide outreach and education, and then we provide technical assistance. So if anybody has a complaint, like a drainage complaint, construction complaint, we will respond. So here's our team. So we have 3 plan reviewers in our office. And I don't know the total number of projects that we get per year, but it's well over 100. And they come in different ways. So if it's a single family house permit, we probably see about 3,000 a year. If it's standard plans, we see a couple hundred. And then if it's detailed plans, meaning new developments, commercial projects, we're probably in about the 150 range. So these guys are very busy. Our field team, these guys are out in the field. So these are your inspectors, construction inspectors, maintenance inspector, and then also resources for any kind of construction, drainage complaint. These are the guys that are going to show up if you call our office. And I'm very fortunate because collectively they have years of experience, and I am very fortunate to have them on our team, and they do a great job. So administrative support in our office, Liam Thompson has been with us since he graduated from Sussex Tech and got his college degree. So he was an intern with us and has been scanning all of the subdivision plans from 1991 and archiving all of them. So if you call our office, and he's our records manager, So if you're looking for development plans, he's your guy. He's on paternity leave right now, so he'll be your guy in about 3 more weeks. But so we have all of those documents scanned and we can just email them to you. So if you're here representing a community and you don't have the development plans, we do have them scanned. Jennifer Grace has been with the district for 30 some years since the very beginning, and is a huge resource. And then Faith is a huge resource to our team that is also supporting all of anybody who calls the office. She's kind of fielding the complaints and then helping contractors and stuff like that. Liam also recently became drone certified, so he's also flying a lot of our projects these days. And so that has been a great resource to have a young person on the team who's willing to do all that. So plan review, and also if somebody has questions as I'm going through this, please raise your hand, because I'm doing this day in and day out, I forget. So if there's a point that doesn't make sense, please stop me. But when somebody is starting a project, a development project, and they're saying, hey, look, I'm looking at this parcel here, I'm thinking about doing a residential project, they come in with a conceptual design meeting and kind of talk about it. And we have enough resources today to look up GIS information, drainage complaints. We kind of know where a lot of the challenging locations throughout the county are, high water tables, no drainage outlet. Mapping today is so excellent that we can look at a lot of this stuff very early and give some guidance on a project. We also have to have pre-application meetings, which are required under the state regulations. And at the pre-application meeting, they're kind of telling us how they're going to comply with the regulations. So a lot of people have the misconception that, well, the district told me to put this pond here, and it doesn't really work like that. So a consultant has many different ways that they can comply with the regulations. So they're submitting plans demonstrating compliance. We don't tell them where they have to put the stormwater, where they put the houses. They do all of that work. We review it to make sure it complies with regulations, that it's going to make sense, that it's going to work. So those are the things that we're looking for. And in plan review, when you have a land use change, so if you're going from a property that is farmed or wooded, and you're putting in some type of commercial development, you are going to have a significant land use change in the watershed. So you're increasing runoff from that property, and that's really the intent of the stormwater facility. The stormwater is there to mitigate the land use change. So if it was a woods or an ag field, that stormwater is there to mitigate that land use change and to hold the water back and kind of meter flows, what we call a pre-development rate. We're also looking at sediment erosion control. So when that project is under construction, and here's the other thing, there's stages to a project. So you don't automatically get to the point where the stormwater is in and operational. You'll have a pond there during initial construction, but that pond is not working to its stormwater configuration. It's functioning as a temporary sediment trap during construction. So it's intended to collect sediment-laden runoff, hold that runoff, and try to clean it up before it discharges through our waterways. So there's different sediment and erosion control practices that are used on projects to minimize the transport of sediment.
I am so sorry. I even have this on silent.
That's all right.
Enjoy a little music.
Yeah, right. So when we get the plan submitted to us, we're looking at, the stormwater management. Is that going to make sense? Is that going to work in this location? Where's the water going? Do we have downstream impacts in this location? We're also looking at sediment and erosion control, how we're controlling the site when it's under construction. So, your silt fence that you see around construction sites, stone construction entrance, there's a whole bunch of different tools that are used to try to keep the dirt on the property and not discharge, but that has its own set of challenges. Pollution prevention, as-built review, technical assistance. So there's lots of things that our plan reviewers are doing to make sure that projects are going to work and that we're verifying proper construction through as-built. And I'll talk about that a little bit more as we go. So inspection, and I mentioned earlier, our involvement in your community really is for perpetuity. So we kick off with, once the project is approved, and they then have permission to go to construction. So they've bonded, they've gone through all these procedures, they've gotten all the agency approvals, and we are at the point of we are ready to break ground. They have what's called a pre-construction meeting. And the pre-construction meetings are held in our office. where we have everybody there. So there's anywhere from 3 to 15 people at a pre-construction meeting going over the project, making sure everybody is certified, is the contractor certified to do the work? Does everybody have a copy of the approved plan? So making sure that we've got all the right resources, contacts, everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. So then they break ground, and then that triggers routine site inspection. And so, like I said, there's different stages to the project where, those early stages, depending on what the weather's like, things can go well, and then sometimes things don't go well. So there's mass bulk grading that happens. You have different perimeter controls in place that are there to try to keep all of the dirt on site. The thing that wreaks havoc for us is when you take a snapshot in time of, you go to that project, everything looks good, and that night you get 5 inches of rain. So that's when things go bad of, we're in the middle of constructing this pond and we didn't get it finished. We didn't know we were getting this pop-up storm. And those are some of the challenges that our guys have to face, and they kind of faced this past winter, back-to-back storms out of a growing season in the winter months. And that's kind of when we have construction issues. And then, like I said, our involvement in a project is from that pre-construction meeting all the way to perpetuity till we turn it over to you guys. But that construction process can take anywhere from, if it's a commercial project, it can be a couple months. Like if it's a convenience store, they're usually open in 3 months, 3 to 6, it can be up to 20 years, because we have some projects like the golf course, resort communities. I mean, we're still inspecting those projects because they're not fully constructed. So, and there's different stages to that initial bulk grading all the way to just building single family homes, but we're still a resource going out there inspecting. So stormwater maintenance inspection. So we don't actually know the total number of stormwater facilities, but we have about 3,000 closed out projects throughout the county, because we're going from 1991 to now inspecting all of those projects. So we're obviously not going to all of these stormwater facilities because we don't have the resources to do that. And honestly, our maintenance inspector is wearing a couple hats at the moment. And so if somebody calls and requests that we do an annual inspection, Buddy Griffith, our maintenance inspector, will come out, we'll do an inspection, provide you a report. But really, we encourage you to have a pond maintenance company who is overseeing that, that they're providing routine and preventive maintenance to you guys, because they're going to be able to monitor it, reach out to us if they have questions. If anything happens, we can come out there and meet with them or a community and kind of discuss what the concerns are. So types of stormwater facilities, and so there's different types. So obviously everybody knows the wet pond, which is just that. It is a pond that has water in it. But there's also dry ponds, infiltration ponds, bioswales, bioretention, filter strips, even stormwater facilities that are underneath parking lots. So like along Route 1, where real estate is very expensive, that Route 1 corridor between Lewis and Rehoboth has the best infiltration, sandy soils, because it's beach, throughout the state. So there's a lot of like the outlets, different commercial projects, their stormwater is underneath the parking lot. So, because a lot of people say, well, I don't know where their stormwater is. Well, it's underneath the parking lot. So there are many different types of stormwater facilities, even vegetated roofs. If you've been to Bethany Blues in Rehoboth, they have a vegetated roof. So there's lots of different ways to comply with the stormwater regulations. So first one we're going to talk about is wet ponds, which is really, I think, what most people see in their community, because it's a selling feature. It's an amenity. They need the dirt for the project. So you will have stormwater facilities and they need to comply with the regulations. And which is why the pond is there, is to mitigate that land use change. But then they don't have to make it a wet pond. Some areas of the county where we have a high water table, Bethany, Millville, Ocean View, you have limited options because groundwater is so high. So in those particular areas, pretty much always going to have a wet pond. Rehoboth, Lewis, we have areas with good infiltration. So you could have an infiltration or a dry pond, but a lot of times you'll see the wet ponds just because I think it's more of a selling feature. So how does the pond work? So and this is part, a lot of people call us about swales, roadside swale communities, we don't actually have authority over the swales in your community. Sussex County, most of the roads in Sussex County are privately owned roads, or privately owned roads, meaning the county is going to inspect that road to comply with county standards. And then once everything is done and they've signed off on the developer, it gets turned over to the community. It is then your road to privately maintain. And that includes the swale system. So the road and the road right of way, the county inspects until they close it out, and then they turn it over to the community. So we know enough to be dangerous and can provide guidance and can answer questions about the roadside swales. But if you call our office and it's an actively construction, it's under active construction, we are going to direct you to Sussex County Public Works, who has authority over that. And whether the community has swales or a pipe storm drain system, that is up to the developer. Nobody really dictates that. Swales, obviously, from a water quality perspective, are better, but more challenging. Most people like storm drain because you don't want to see the water in your front of your house. But there's pros and cons with each. If I can figure out this. So inflow, this could be a swale system, or this could be a pipe that pipes into the stormwater facility. Water flows into the pond, sediment drops out, hopefully into what we call a forebay, and I'll show a picture of that in the next slide. Actually, I think I can go back forward. Yeah. So these are your initial inflows. So this community here has curb and gutter. So they still have inlet protection in the community, which are those bags that you see in the catch basins, which everybody hates, but they're necessary. They do flood the streets, but they're intended to try to trap sediment before it washes into the pond. But that pipe inflow, when it comes in, these are called forebays. And they vary in size. They can be gabion baskets. They can look different throughout different communities, but this is your initial collection point. So the water flows into the forebay. Sediment is intended to drop out in this forebay and not, proceed into the rest of the pond. Because if you have to do a dip out, they really just want to do the forebay, especially if you have a lined stormwater facility. You're not dredging this pond. That's not going to happen. You're really just going to dip out these forebays. And that's really the extent of any kind of major excavation on a stormwater facility once it's constructed. So cleaner water is intended to go out the outlet structure. When it's under construction, you'll see this modified. It'll have like a skimmer device or some other kind of temporary riser on it to try to filter out sediment. But once it's converted to its permanent stormwater facility, this will be typically a small low flow orifice, and the water in your pond has to be at or below that low flow orifice. So your storage for the 210 and 100 year is everything above that low flow orifice. So the water is going to go up and the water is going to go back down, but you're always going to have water in it. So we're not looking at, for storage capacity, we're not looking at the water that's in this now. This pond has full capacity, and this picture has full capacity for a rain event. So let's say we get, a 100-year storm event, it's going to be going out this orifice and it's going to be going over top of this structure. But then in about 72 hours, we want all that water to be gone, and we want to regain all of that storage back in that stormwater facility. So we want to see that little orifice again. So what I always tell people kind of before a storm event, always go and look at your ponds. When you walk your dog, walk around, look at where the water elevation is, because sometimes we'll go into communities and we can see something is wrong, the water is way too high. And so we've had some cases where somebody has put a ball in the pipe, where there's a trash bag that's kind of lodged, or some kind of construction debris that's lodged in this low flow orifice, or somebody just wants more water. And we've had some people like completely parge this hole because they paid for a water view and they want the water view. So all kinds of things can happen. However, there's consequences to those actions, because you don't have the storage for the big rain event. And that's what you need. So right now we just had, we're in peak hurricane season, knock on wood. It's been pretty quiet for us, but we want to make sure that we have that storage capacity. I mean, look at North Carolina, they just got 18 inches. They had this 1,000-year storm. Our 100-year storm in Sussex County is 9.2 inches in 24 hours. So what's really important is that duration. So if we get 5 inches in 2 hours, that could be comparable to greater than a 100-year storm. So that timing is very important. So some people they'll call us and they'll say, we only got 4 inches of rain. I'm like, but we got 4 inches in 2 hours. That's a flash flood. I mean, that's what's gonna, that could be comparable to that 100-year design storm. And then we've had cases where we had 15 inches in Seaford back in 2005, 2006. Well, that far exceeded. And that wasn't even like a named storm. It was just some type of crazy cell. That was like a 300, 500-year storm, and we had extensive flooding. So you always want to make sure that your ponds have appropriate capacity. We have a lot of communities that have pond fills. Please do not run those pond fills all the time, because water should not be going out this pond all the time. So, and some of the pond fills that don't have a flotation on them, they're discharging 24/7, and they're changing the hydrology on the receiving end. So we'll have trees that are now saturated that were never saturated before, and then the trees start to fall over. So I've seen that in some communities. So those pond fills should not be running 24/7.
Excuse me,
Yeah,
could you please describe or explain what a pond fill is? I'm not familiar with that.
sure. So a pond fill, so they have a well, whether it's an ag well or an artesian or whatever type of well, and they're filling the pond with water to maintain a permanent pool elevation. So like right now, we've had weeks of dry weather. So elevations in the ponds naturally are low. But that's good depending on, how you're looking at it. In our stormwater world, we've got storage for a big storm event if we get a cell. A lot of communities are like, I paid for a premium lot view. I want this fountain running. The fountain is not working. I can't see the water. It starts to draw down. So people put pond fills in to regulate a permanent pool. They can do that. There's nothing in the regulations to prevent them from putting a pond fill in, but where they can have a well that kind of maintains the water but it shouldn't be going above this low flow orifice. But that also means it's constantly, if they don't have it regulated, where it's kicking on when it drops low, does that make sense? Then it's constantly flowing. Because I have some communities that have it connected to their irrigation system, and so it runs first, just like the irrigation system runs every day, whether it rained or not. So, and that's really kind of an abuse to, the whole intent, and it's changing the hydrology on the receiving end. But that's why people put them in to maintain the fountains. They want the water view. So, and it's not something we regulate. So if you call me and say, hey, my neighbor keeps turning the well on, unfortunately, there's not much that I can do with that individual. I just have to educate people, like, please don't do that. So again, this is just kind of a standard wet pond. This is a lined stormwater facility, still functioning as a temporary sediment trap. So this is not a completed project, but it was just a good picture to show the floor base. And so for stormwater maintenance, and we kind of talked about the importance of making sure that this outlet structure, so when you go to do an inspection, or if you're walking your dog around the pond or in the area, always look for the outlet structure. It could be a weir wall, just a concrete spillway, or it could be a structure that looks like this, just a concrete box. And there will be openings on that box. Sometimes they have like an orange trash or yellow trash rack on them. And those are guards to prevent anything from kind of lodging in that hole. It's trying to keep that hole open. Same thing with this trash rack here. It's a peaked system. So if any kind of like construction debris or anything falls on it, the intent is hopefully it sheds off. So it's very important during these storm events to make sure that, we've got storage. So I'll show some more pictures of outlet structures. So you also want to make sure that you don't have any trees growing around that structure. For dry ponds, you want to make sure that that orifice is open. Yes.
So on that previous picture of the wet pond.
Yep.
I see the rock filtering at each inlet.
Yep.
But around the perimeter of the dark around the perimeter, is that vegetation or?
Yeah, I think that, so this is still a sediment trap. So this is not a completed stormwater facility. So this is still a very active construction community. We typically, I'll be honest, we're flying with the drone active construction sites. So I didn't have like good pictures of completed maintained stormwater facilities. So this, yeah, there's some later, but this particular one is of a sediment trap. So I would say in this is probably due to the fluctuating water table in this location, with it going up and down. And this picture was taken early in the growing season, so it's not very green, and this was taken about May. Yes.
Forebay, Forebeay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So all 4 bays are required in stormwater facilities. If you're in an older community, we might not have something as prominent as this in some of the older communities, but 4 bays are the initial inflow where they want suspended fines to kind of drop out and settle in these areas. So when you have to do maintenance, if it's about, it gets dip out in just those locations and not the whole pond. And when it's about 50% full is when you want to do dip out. So when it gets when the project gets closed out and gets turned over to a community, we're going to look at those 4 bays and see if it looks okay. If it looks like it needs to be dipped out, then we'll put it on the punch list for the developer to address before turnover. Yes.
Do I understand correctly, to clean out the 4 bays, you have to drain or lower the pond level?
No, I mean, a lot of times it's going to be manual work because like for this case, this is a lime stormwater facility. So you do have to be very careful. Like we wouldn't take a mini excavator in this particular one. And then granted, it's also catching it at the right time. So if you don't have a well in there and that water table is fluctuating, we can try to hit it at those points when the water's low. So like right now would be a good time to probably dip out any kind of 4 bays and visibly see those areas. Yes.
When you said the older communities may not have a 4 bay, around what year are we talking about?
It kind of depends. I would say prior to 2015, you should have one, but they might not be this big. They might be much smaller. It might just be what we call like a riprap spillway, or riprap like an apron. Yeah. Okay, so other things for general maintenance, always look at the outlet structure, always look for debris, trash, maintaining access, no trees around these areas, unwanted vegetation, native plants. We definitely want the buffer. I'll talk about that a little bit more. Monitoring for invasives, always looking for erosion. Our soils here are highly erodible, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, but catching that early is very important. So routine maintenance. So when we go out, under the stormwater regulations, I'll be honest, in Denrec's world, they don't really care if it's pretty. It just has to be there. It has to function correctly, be vegetated, non-erosive, good working condition. But it's not the level of expectation that I think a lot of communities want, because the people will say, well, I picked this lot because they told me there was going to be a fountain. Fountains are not required in the state regulations. Enhanced vegetation is not required. Flowering vegetation is not required. So there's a lot of things that a lot of developers are doing to enhance it, to sell lots. We want that enhancement because we have healthier habitat. So we also are trying to encourage those to do it, but it's not always a developer responsibility. So removing debris and any kind of trash or debris, those really windy days that we have. If anybody lives in a community that still has active construction, you know what I'm talking about. It would drive me crazy. But if you live in a community where there's houses under construction, we'll get those windy days and that trash is going to go somewhere. We just have to make sure that it's not going to block any kind of pipes or structures. And then we've got the human factor of people trying to do things themselves. So really just keep an eye on your stormwater facilities. Having a fluctuating water table is not something that's regulated. We talked about that a little bit with the wells. When we have a wet pond design that comes through the office, they have to demonstrate to us how that pond is going to hold water either naturally or they're going to have to line it. So when a project is submitted to us, there's detailed soils investigations that's required to demonstrate, will this pond just have groundwater, seasonal high, or is this pond require a liner because it's not holding any water without the liner? So all of that is determined at plan review.
Excuse me, I have
Yes.
another question.
Yep.
Regarding the evaluation of the soils at that engineer design stage, are those soils subject to being brought in from another site and create
A liner?
well, in effect, create a liner
Yep.
that would otherwise, I guess a rubber plastic liner?
They can do that. So the standards
So they can
for,
bring in our soils from another region and use them as the liner.
so they can, so for liners, so let's just say that the soil borings come back and they're like, this pond is dry. that's never gonna hold water without a liner. So their options for a liner are, they can put a 30 mil PVC liner in, and then there's specifications for putting the liner in. So there's different types of liners, but it has to meet the 30 mil. If they don't choose that route, they can use natural clay. And so the clay has to meet a certain permeability criteria, 10 to the -6. And it has to be verified by a geotechnical engineer. They submit a report saying that this clay meets these specifications. Then the clay is typically brought in, it'll be 12 inches. It'll be rolled and compaction verified by a geotechnical engineer. So sometimes they're able to get clay on site that'll meet that specification. We don't have great clay here everywhere throughout Sussex.
Right.
But sometimes we'll hit it where, they can either use it from this one project, or the developer will say, I've got it on this project, and they import it. So that has happened, because clay is not common everywhere, so they can bring it in.
Thank you.
Is that clay typically a dark color?
I don't know. A lot of the dark soils that we see, I think, are usually more hydric. I didn't think it was dark. Not like the red clays that you would see, I think, up north, like in Newcastle.
When you have a liner, and maybe there are two different purposes to water collection. I'm used to thinking of allowing the water to trickle down into the soil.
Mhm.
It's a good thing, but
Yes.
for certain situations, apparently you don't want that to happen, or you don't want it to happen too quickly.
So we're going to talk about infiltration facilities. So infiltrations are a great stormwater feature because they're providing quantity and quality treatment. They're, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. I think a lot of people do wet ponds, depending on where they are in the county. In Ocean View, Bethany, Millville, very high water table. They're pretty much stuck doing wet ponds, because in some areas they're developing, I'll be honest, groundwater is 2 feet below the ground. And that's why sometimes there's these massive stormwater facilities. One, they need the dirt to raise the site. And then 2, your storage, when we talked about is everything above that water. So we now have huge ponds in areas because we need that storage volume for up to that 100-year storm. So everything that's submitted to our office, we're looking at it up to the 100-year storm, the 9.2 inches in 24 hours. We're making sure that those facilities are containing that. The county does allow for some of that water to come out of catch basins on the roads temporarily, backflow into some swales, but everything is designed to that 100-year design storm. Did I answer your question?
Swales that can be affected, are those the privately owned swales within the HO, within the community?
Yeah.
Or could those swales also be in Delta right of ways?
Oh, they can be a DelDOT, but Delta, it gets a little more complicated when we have DelDOT involved. For those laughing, no. Yes. So if we have a project that discharges to DelDOT, before we approve that project, we have to make sure that DelDOT is accepting of that water. So DelDOT will review the plans also and say, we concur this water came to us in pre-development. And they're managing it to the acceptable rates so that it matches, the post-development matches the pre-development. They're not increasing flows. So if it flooded in pre-development, they will allow some flooding to occur in post-development, meaning after the development is there. So if it flooded before the development, they are allowed a certain level of flooding after the development. Never worse. Does that make sense?
Well, if you were Delta.
Yeah. So, and then there's certain roads with DelDOT that you've got roads, and I don't know all the ins and outs with DelDOT, but certain roads, depending on that classification, like you can't, like Route 1 would be one that I think that's designed not to flood for like the 50-year. So like there's certain roads that they don't want water on for certain storm events, and I don't know what all of those classifications are, but you can have water in the road. You will, during a 100-year storm, you will have water in roadside swales for temporarily until it recedes. Yep.
Thank you.
So again, trash and debris, if you live in an active construction community or are adjacent to a commercial project, you're going to see construction debris, unfortunately, or trash. You're going to see trash. And then it's windy here at times. So being mindful of that it doesn't lodge into any outlet structure is huge. Also for any stormwater facility, whether it's a wet pond or not, mowing, mowing where the outfall structures, where you have inflow pipes, concrete pipes, outlet structures, making sure that those areas, don't have any kind of woody vegetation. You don't have to mow it on a regular basis. It's just enough where any kind of tree sapling growth is, cut. Because you don't want big trees. And the longer you wait for a tree, the more expensive it's going to be to remove it. So if you can catch it early. Now, this is the big question in a lot of communities, to buffer or not buffer. This is the saga that has continued forever. From the conservation district, we will always support the buffer. The wider you are willing to allow that buffer, the better. Our soils here are highly erodible, so if you mow this on a regular basis and you do not have irrigation, you will have erosion. That is a guarantee. Because just look at this past month, I don't know if we've had any rain this past month, and if you mowed that, if that was still on your regular mowing schedule, those pond side slopes, those sandy soils will erode, and you'll start to see kind of where the mower has scalped it. You'll start to see those kind of patches on the stormwater facility. So really, you want to have those areas as no mow, or that you're mowing less frequently. And even some communities have gone to the extent of, enhancement with flowering vegetation, and talk to these guys here that are with us today. Create that pollinator. Granted, I realize it's expensive, but you don't have to do it all in the first year. You guys can budget this stuff. This is really what's ideal. And we've got some communities who've done this. We have one development that created extensive buffers, no-mow areas. They actually have meetings in their clubhouse with beekeepers. They have like a group of beekeepers that comes. I mean, that's full circle. That's what we want, is to take these stormwater facilities, which are there, to manage stormwater runoff so that we don't increase flows downstream. They're also there providing water quality, but they are also habitats. And they're supporting ecosystems, and we want to enhance those and educate everybody the importance of doing this. So if your committee is only allowing like a 3-foot buffer, I mean, granted, I will take it, but if you're willing to do 10, that's that much better. So, yes.
You're getting ready to talk about, the other piece of that is geese control.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. If anybody lives in a community with a big pond, you know what I'm talking about. I've never, they can be such a nuisance. So the buffers naturally deter the geese. It doesn't always work. I realize that, and talk to these guys because they know the different tools. I've seen the monofilament and some other things that they use to deter the geese. So that's another benefit to the buffers. But again, just creating the habitat. I love when I go to people's communities and I'll see different herons, green herons. You just see the habitat. And so I feel like it's our job to enhance that. What's that? With the boat, so their natural predator instinct is they like it kind of manicured where they can walk right down to the water's edge. So their predator instinct of like there could be a fox or something.
And
But
if you don't believe that, put a wide buffer on there. I have a pond at my home. I used to allow 2 pairs to, nest there. I don't anymore. I don't mow down. I mean, the bigger and wider the buffer you have, it's better for the environment, it's better for pollinators, but it also will cover.
With that buffer, so if you let it go, 6 feet, it gets pretty tall. What's the recommended height to people also want to look at it?
yeah, that's a really good question. So I know these guys, talk to these guys because they can maintain a height for you. I think, is it typically like 2 feet you guys do?
2, 3.
2, 3. So they'll maintain a height. So sometimes people, they don't want to see the leggy stuff that kind of grows a little too wild. So they'll kind of maintain a height for you. That's maybe a little bit more desirable to some of the people who live on the pond. So that's one way to address that. Yep. Okay. Maintain vegetation. We talked about this, making sure that you don't have trees and stuff around these outlet structures, because the longer you wait, the more expensive that's going to be. And then also, and I didn't talk about this earlier, these outlet structures, it's discharging to something, meaning that water is going into some type of flow channel, whether it's a tax ditch, a stream, Delta, wherever it's going, we want to make sure that there's no obstruction on the receiving end, because we've had some cases where a tree has fallen over and this massive root system is now in the ditch blocking drainage. So, you're gonna look, if that pond is holding above those orifices we talked about, and there's nothing that you can tell that's blocking that outlet structure, there might be something on the downstream end. So, and then also, if you see something like that, feel free to contact our office and we can come out and take a look. Yes.
So I'm assuming that that sort of overgrowth would be something that would be cited during maintenance inspection.
Yep.
What is the ramification of allowing that to happen and not fixing it?
So I can't reach.
Not from an environmental point of view, but
Right.
from a legal point of view.
No, that's a great question. So I can't write you a ticket, send you a violation or anything like that. We would say, hey, you need to address this. The only thing that we can do is educate and say, the longer you wait, the more expensive it's going to be. Because, something that you could treat as just saplings earlier, maybe you have to replace the outlet structure.
Does DNREC have that authority?
I'll be honest, I believe that they probably do. Have they exercised it? I don't think, not with an HOA on maintenance. So remove small saplings. Okay, so we talked about this. So some communities have embankments. I didn't really talk about that. There are a couple communities throughout Sussex County that have an embankment. And what that means is it's not a fully excavated pond, meaning it's got a man-made dam on it. And they're small impoundments. So like up in Newcastle, you would probably have some that are larger. Meaning the side slope of it was a dam that was created. And some of those are a little more critical, and we do keep an eye on those. And we try to educate communities which ones have those, have an embankment. Stabilized banks, and we talked about this. So if you mow to the edge, you will have erosion, and you'll have erosion in two places. You'll have erosion on the pond side slopes. And if you have a fountain in that pond and you mow to the edge, this will also begin to crater. So this whole edge, because of the fountain running, will start to slough the side slopes. To me, it looks horrible. Like you go out and a pond that you would have something that looks like this, a smooth edge, this just becomes sloughed in. So, and we had talked about, we never really want these ponds to be fully dredged. If and if the whole upstream drainage area is stabilized, so if the community is all vegetated or a hard surface, we don't have a source of sediment, you really shouldn't be dredging these. But if you allow it to erode, it is more likely that those facilities, if you don't allow for a buffer, those are going to require some type of excavation more so than a facility like this. So if that makes sense.
So I have a question with that.
yes.
So in that first picture, you see how, like you said, it's lost into the lake.
Mhm.
Now you have vegetation growing in that area.
So we do want, and I didn't talk about this either. So this is a shelf area. So the state regulations require when you have a wet pond, you have a 10-foot level safety bench. So fencing, and in the presentation, it talks about this a little bit more. Fencing is not required in Delaware. The only safety feature built into wet ponds is this 10-foot level safety bench. So the whole thought process is if you were walking around this pond and you stumbled, you would hit that bench, which has 1 foot of water over it, and it protrudes out 10 feet, that you would hit that bench and be able to walk out of that pond.
And what if you have vegetation growing over
So-
the bench and
so
the
the-
edge?
So
You
the
don't have that
vegetation, so
strong.
we do want this planted with aquatic vegetation. So some of the pictures the one I showed earlier that had the dragonfly on the pickerel weed, we do want that planted with some of the aquatic vegetation, like the duck potato. I think these guys are the experts. They'll tell you which plants to put in this location. It keeps the bench in place. It prevents this from migrating. And really, I think it's beautiful. It enhances the stormwater facility.
Lindsay, on that picture, you have that rock formation. Is that a riprap?
Yes,
Okay.
so this looks to be a riprap inflow. Whether there's a pipe sticking in here, I'm not 100% sure, but it looks like a riprap inflow.
So that should never have any vegetation in those rocks.
Well, I mean, I personally don't have a problem with the vegetation in the rocks. I think a lot of people say to spray it because I think the root system can mess up the fabric that's underneath it. So there's a geotextile fabric that's underneath that rock, and I think the vegetation kind of mess with that fabric. Yep. Okay, so fencing. So fencing is not required if people are here from other states. This might be something that you saw. I know where I grew up, I saw fences. It was horrible. It would collect trash, all kinds of debris everywhere. I thought it was hideous. The state has said no fencing is required because they didn't really feel like it kept the child out, that it was providing any more safety than not having it. So they only have that 10-foot level of safety bench I talked about. But it really just kind of obstructs being able to get in there and do any kind of maintenance. So when to hire a professional? You know, I have a lot of communities that call and they say, well, I used to do this in, you know, in this state or that state. You know, really, you should make sure that you understand the regulations here locally and, you know, not applying pesticides. I had one person who was trying to treat mosquitoes with bleach. I had one person sucking up all those, like, I don't know if they're some kind of small toad, I forget what they're called, with the shop vac. Like it's, you know, please call somebody. And know when to hire a professional. So, you know, having those licensed individuals come in and know what type of chemical to use, the appropriate equipment to use, and then reaching out to agencies who can help. This is another big problem that we see in a lot of communities. We'll see these sinkholes. I don't know if anybody is in here has seen one in their community. Typically where a storm drain pipe will separate from like either another pipe or from a catch basin, and you start to get that sinkhole where they keep putting dirt in and it keeps disappearing. Those are things that are pretty common. You know, please contact our office or contact a contractor to come in, and you're going to have to fix it. Usually they excavate it out and make the patch and fix all of that so that there's no seepage, water getting through those structures. Again, erosion is a big thing for us. Depending on if you get a storm event that exceeds a 100-year design storm, you're going to have erosion. If there was some type of small erosion there that has started, it is not going to get better. It's not going to fix itself. It will only get worse and get more expensive. So there's significant price tags with all of that. So the longer you wait, the more expensive it is. So always kind of take a look at things. If you start to see erosion, like I said, doesn't get better. Mosquito control, this is another complaint we get a lot, whether it's the swales or the stormwater facility or their backyard. You know, this is just mosquitoes are going to be with us forever. So it is a free service. They're out of Milford, so we just recommend communities contact them about spraying. I know a lot of the stormwater facilities get stocked with the fish, the mosquito fish. That is another, you know, talk to these guys about that as well. Again, vegetation, identifying, I use a plant app, which I think is amazing, to identify a lot of things. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. And it'll tell me if it's invasive or not, but also you can take samples, and I think Tracy, they can bring it here, right? And you guys will, yeah, for ID to identify it, or reach out to your pond maintenance company, to see if this is something that's taking over, and needs to be managed. So, and again, and this is, the state is not going to, like in the state regulations don't talk about this. They don't talk about, hey, you have algae and you have to treat it. They really just talk about the ponds being here to provide quantity and quality treatment because of the land use change in the watershed. They're not really talking about the aesthetics. They're not talking about the enhancement. These are things that we're looking to you guys as stewards of the land to kind of take over and enhance and work with experts to do. So again, looking at these structures, if you start to see a sinkhole and it keeps getting bigger, these are things where you need to address pretty quickly. And again, call our office. We have multiple staff that'll come out and kind of assess the situation and determine what you need to do. This was actually Tanager, or Tanger. Is it Tanger? Tanger. Yeah, Tanger. At the mall. So they had a huge washout. This is years ago. They had a huge, massive washout that they had to go back in and do this repair. So I would hope this wouldn't be in any, I'm pretty sure if this was in your community, you would get a call before it looked like this. Yeah. So again, you know, hire a professional. And I would hope people's stormwater facility would not look like this, like forgotten forever. So again, these are things, even vegetation, this didn't have that peaked track, it was a flat. But this can seal off and prevent water from leaving. So if the water can't leave, that means it's gonna flood internally. So your roadside swales, storm drains, if the water cannot go out the outlet structure, it's going to recede back into the community. And that's what we don't want. So again, this one, we found that has a low flow orifice in the front. I think it had like a trash bag or something that was lodged in it. So at this elevation, typically the top of the structure is typically the 100-year overflow. So everything, when engineers submit plans to our office, they have to run the 2, 10, and 100-year storm. And typically, the 100-year, this is always the emergency overflow. Sometimes you have a spillway also, but you can look at this picture and say, I have no capacity in this stormwater facility. Because the water is essentially 2.5 feet above where it's supposed to be, which means I have no storage in this entire system for any storm event, because it's going to flood back. So these are things to be very mindful of. The other thing that this does, yes.
Said a public meeting long ago where the developer talked about what's planned was approved by SCD at 40%, 40-something% coverage of the land, and for a 10-year storm. And the city where this took place has a requirement of pervious surfaces, or impervious surfaces can't exceed 60%. So why would SCD approve something for just 40% coverage? And why did you think you only had to meet the 10 years?
So all projects have to comply with up to, they have to show stormwater calculations up to the 100-year. So, I mean, that's a given. Back in the day, like 2005, it used to just be the 10-year, and they would show safe conveyance of the 100-year. But that hasn't been the case, since 2005. You have to run the 100-year storm, and that 100-year storm has changed over the years. It used to be 7.9 inches, now it's 9.2. But we're looking at a project to comply with state regulations. If they're in a municipality that says, hey, this is the criteria, we're not looking, nor do we know that they're having to meet some type of municipal requirements. We're looking for compliance with the stormwater regulations. So if the town was more restrictive than us, that developer still needs to comply with the town, but we wouldn't be reviewing, that would not be our review standard. Does that make sense?
It does, except that the town says, well, if you meet SCD requirements, then you're good to go. We don't have separate stormwater regulations other than we have lot coverage regulations. Not have more than say 60% pervious or impervious rather coverage.
Right.
So if you're designing 40% coverage, then you're setting yourself up for failure.
So so when you say 40%, 40% impervious would be less than the 60%, so they would still be meeting the town's requirement. Is that what you meant? Like did they design to 60% and the town said you can only have a maximum of 40%?
No, it's the opposite.
So if they have a project that's 40% impervious and the town says the maximum is 60, well, they met it. Does that make sense?
They didn't. No, because there's nothing to, I mean, they're saying 40%. But there's nothing, they're just designing a layout, and when someone comes in and starts doing landscaping, builds a house, whatever, they can go up to 60%.
Oh, okay. So if right, well, all of that would be factored in. So like when we get plans, so the plans aren't just for the road, like a development road, they account for they figure out the sizing of the houses and they account for the impervious of those homes, going to the stormwater facility. So we know it's fully developed. The stormwater facility is sized for a fully developed community. But if the town, they had requirements on that maximum impervious, we wouldn't necessarily know that, but pretty much all the towns have engineers on staff or contracts with engineering firms, so they're reviewing it as well as us. So, I don't know, but we can talk more about it if we need to later. The only other thing I was gonna say about in this particular picture, if a pond holds water too long above its design permanent pool, anything longer than 72 hours will kill the grass. So not only do you need to get this pond lowered, you're now gonna have a 2.5 foot band of dead grass around the whole perimeter of the facility. And that gets expensive. So again, making sure you have a buffer to kind of reduce any kind of nutrients from going in these stormwater facilities, because you will get algae blooms and it gets pretty funky. So that's why we have these guys here to, if you called us and we're like, hey, what do we treat this algae with? We're gonna tell you to call a professional, because we that's not our expertise. We don't treat algae. We're looking for compliance with regulations, so we would direct you to a pond maintenance company. Again, same thing here. We would direct you to a pond maintenance company to figure out, what it is, what type of chemical, the rate, that's not something that we're gonna do. One thing too, I just wanted to point out, a lot of people ask us about planting trees on pond side slopes. Trees should not be planted on the pond side slopes. They can be planted on the pond top of bank, the flat area, as long as it's not an embankment. Which we don't have a lot of those, meaning if it's a fully excavated pond that does not have a man-made dam, you can plant trees on the flat area, just not on the side slopes. Because those trees, if wind, as they get bigger, they topple over, it just becomes, a maintenance nightmare.
Can you define embankments again? I know you mentioned it
Yes, so an embankment it's basically a dam. And those dams can be different sizes. So mostly like an excavated pond is basically completely flat ground, and they dug the pond in that flat area. But every now and then we'll have a slope, because they're going to put the stormwater facilities in the lowest point. And so that means it's going closer to a ditch or closer to a branch. And so because you're gonna direct that flow downstream, water's going to be directed to it. And then sometimes when it gets close to some type of branch, there's a slope. And we need to create one whole side of that stormwater facility. And it's basically a dam that's created to impound that water before it goes to the branch. And those are, they have geotechnical engineers that help design that. They were present during the excavation. They certified the design. There's only a handful of them. We do have them. There's a handful of them in the county. So. This always feel like somebody's wife volunteered them, and he's like, or he said that he could do this. This obviously, you need a professional. And we have a lot of communities, HOAs that are very active, which I think is amazing. Like they do all kinds of planting projects, but certain things really, you should hire a professional. Dry ponds. So dry ponds are just that. So we talked about the wet ponds having storage from the low flow orifice. And above. A dry pond it's dry, and your storage is everything above, from the bottom of that facility up. So the low flow orifice is usually sitting on the bottom of the facility, and we want them to look like this. That's gorgeous. But some people just want it mowed to the edge. And if you mow it, it's an area that collects stormwater runoff. If you mow the bottom of that on a regular basis, you're just going to see tire tracks. You're just going to see the compaction because it's wet ground, and it's going to look hideous. So why not make it a pollinator where you're going to have birds and butterflies and stuff like that? Infiltration facilities. This is another type of stormwater where there is no outfall. So we do have these locations throughout the county where we don't have the water going anywhere. So either they want the infiltration facility because they have great soils, or they don't have a choice, meaning we don't have a ditch, the water, it's flat ground, it does not go anywhere. So with an infiltration facility, you are solely relying on the permeability of the underlying soils to infiltrate stormwater runoff. So like this past winter, where it never stopped raining, those soils become groundwater rises in the winter. So between groundwater rising and back-to-back storm events, we had water sitting in these infiltration facilities longer than 48 hours. There's just nothing we can do. There's, nothing I can do about it. So seasonally, those are things that can happen with infiltration facilities. But when they're designed, there's all kinds of soil borings that tell us, hey, ground seasonal high is 2 feet below the bottom of that facility. They have to meet a certain infiltration rate. So there's definitely state regulations that there's certain design parameters required for that project, for that type of stormwater. Again, this is another type of infiltration facility. I like them planted myself. So I encourage people to plant them because the roots keep the soil more porous and they also take up some of that water. Some areas it's just beach sand, depending on where you are, and it just doesn't support good vegetation. Other types of stormwater facilities. So we don't have authority over the roadside swales in the community, but every now and then you'll have a swale that's maybe between the lots that might be pretty substantial. And this is a stormwater feature. They're called bioswales. So they're a little bit different. They're not your roadside swale. They're typically between houses or at the end of a cul-de-sac. They're usually used for filtering runoff for like a small upstream drainage area. And again, we try to encourage people, this one's between 2 houses. We try to encourage people to enhance them, try to create a no-mow zone in those areas so it filters runoff going through it. And then we've had some communities where they just completely enhanced it with vegetation, or they let it grow up in kind of like a meadow condition, where they still mow the sides, but the flow channel itself is kind of a no-mow. Bioretention. So somebody had talked about rain gardens earlier. Bioretention is very similar to a rain garden, kind of a landscaped depression that is also providing quantity and quality treatment for stormwater runoff. There is maintenance involved in like replacing the mulch. The mulch moves in these areas, unfortunately, depending on the storm event. There is an outlet structure on most of these to collect the larger storm events. But it's just like a garden. It's an area that's going to have to be maintained. So just another picture. I'll be honest, these were something that I want to say between 2000 to 2014, we would see more of these. We do not see these that much anymore.
And why is that?
I think it's the maintenance. So they do require a certified soil mixture. The soil mixture is expensive. And I'll be honest, people complain about the bioretention. So I think developers, they're looking for a feature to sell, and the wet ponds is what they like. And it's easier. It looks aesthetically between the two. They like the look of the wet pond, and we can't really say to somebody, hey, we want you to put a bioretention here. They can pick the different type of stormwater that they want to put in these locations as long as it makes sense and they can comply with the regulations. So they can comply with that BMP criteria. So it's their option to figure it out. Okay. So maintenance inspection. So again, these are some things. How are we doing on time? Okay, all right, I'll talk faster. Okay, so these are some of the things that we look for when we go out. We're going to look for erosion, invasive vegetation, cracking structures, missing trash racks. We're going to look at all of that when we go out. And like I said, you can contact our office and schedule an appointment and ask us to do a maintenance inspection. That is something that we can do. We are not getting to all the thousands of stormwater facilities throughout the county. I'll be honest, whoever's screaming the loudest seems to be where we're going. We are interviewing for another maintenance inspector right now, so hopefully we can get somebody to help out more. So also, like I said, we're looking for obstructions. So we're always going to look at that outlet structure. Is the water where it's supposed to be or below? If not, we've got a problem. It's either with the structure or it's downstream. So those are the big things. We're going to look at the different types of BMP. Is it functioning correctly? Like I said, this past winter, we had a lot of infiltration facilities that were full of water. Were they functioning correctly? No. They are supposed to be dry. But granted, groundwater was ridiculously high. It was several feet above normal, and we had back-to-back storm events. There's going to be some years that that we can't control, and then Mother Nature corrects itself to some degree. So right now, groundwater is really low. So as we get to go into the winter months, groundwater is down and it'll rise depending on what kind of winter. But there will be times that these do not function or infiltrate within 48 hours. So again, and people and contact us for questions. The big thing for us is, we don't want structures to flood. So typically nobody's house should flood. You may be temporarily inconvenienced where water sits longer than you want, but the house itself should be protected. So again, making sure that outlet structures aren't obstructed, that those openings are open. Again, this was a stormwater facility that the commercial project didn't even know was there. I think they recovered like a bunch of grocery carts and stuff in here, and they cleaned it up and it was significantly improved. We do have, for communities, there are the remnant sediment erosion controls that are left. So like inlet protection that's kind of left in some of these grates that have gotten forgotten about, like the backyard catch basin. These are things that we try to make sure it's all removed before it gets turned over to a community, but occasionally it gets left. So here's the catch basin too, that's underneath all of that grass. So making sure that those areas are open and flowing. Again, and this is the trash rack that I was talking about. If you can see that little rack guard that's in there, that yellow thing. If you have one of those on your outlet structure, they call those rack guards, and it protrudes out the outlet structure, and that is to keep it from being blocked with like cattails and stuff like that. So again, this is Craig, our inspector here, looking for this outlet structure that was forgotten in the woods with all of these tree saplings. Again, catching this stuff early before it gets too big, before it gets really expensive. Erosion, this is another one. Catching this, really looking at these ponds before a storm event, understanding how they work, and then right after the storm event to see what happened, especially these big events, because nature will find a path, and the longer you wait, the more expensive that is going to be. So again, this started out small and then became a whole monster. So again, our soils naturally here are very sandy, which means highly erodible. And those are things to keep mindful of. And then we have a lot of communities where they put their pop-ups, they'll extend it into the stormwater facility or some type of other pipe. And if there isn't an erosion dissipator at the end of that pipe to try to diffuse the velocity, it will become channelized. So just be mindful of that. Again, just more, yes.
Are there any regulations controlling pop-ups?
No. So we do not. If somebody has gone beyond their property line and gone into HOA ground, we kind of leave it up to the HOA to say either you have to move it or it's acceptable. I mean, really, the water is intended to get to that stormwater facility. So the pond is sized for that house. It's sized for their water. But if it's a concentrated flow that's going to cause erosion, then the HOA could be picking up the bill for that. So just more erosion pictures. Areas that, this is a dry pond design. And then this just kind of shows, I think this was Milford Hospital. They came back and put an underdrain system and did kind of like a floodplain planting and stuff. So if there's some eyesores in your community and you have funding, there are options to improve it. Again, just, waiting too long, these become very expensive price tags if the flow becomes channelized. And really, a lot of this stuff, we try to catch it before it's turned over to a community. So we'll walk with a lot of the HOAs. So a lot of times the community will have questions. And so I don't live there. So myself, inspectors will come out and we'll walk the development with you and talk to you about how it's supposed to work, what we see. And a lot of this is before turnover. So we type up that punch list and give it to the developer. Sometimes not all of the items that the community wants are on that punch list because I can't make them put a fountain in, I can't make them put a well, but we can fix the erosion so it's turned over in good working condition to the HOA. Again, sediment, that's if you have a community that's under construction, there's going to be sediment from construction vehicles. It should be collected in the forebay initially, and then we try to clean that up before turnover if there's enough sediment in that forebay. So removing trash and debris, we talked about that. Managing invasives, like Phragmites. If you have the start of it, definitely working with your pond maintenance company, because depending the scale of it, that could be a 3-year treatment plan as opposed to something that you could nip in the bud early. And then I try to highlight some successful maintenance. Some pretty ponds in the area. This is Pilot Town. They have extensive wildlife in here. This is their forebay, so it's pretty large. So they just have to dip out this area. I make that sound really easy. That's not easy, but this was their forebay for dip out. And they have extensive buffers, but they do a great job maintaining and enhancing that stormwater. This is just a buffer in the winter months. I mean, I think it's still attractive. I don't know when you guys typically do mowing. Do you guys mow buffers annually, or do you leave it and maintain a height?
Yeah, once or twice annually. It depends on the resident goose population.
Okay.
For sure, but, after nesting season, it's a good time, because again, it's a tourist, it's the geese. And so if you mow right in March, then that's an ideal spot for them to take nesting ground, so.
Okay.
So it varies by community,
Okay.
but once or twice.
Once or twice? What about you guys, Jackie?
Prune the buffers 2 times a year, but we don't mow them completely down. We
Okay.
just keep them at a standard height.
Okay. Tributary, are you guys the same back there?
Yeah, it depends on the community. We try to leave some communities up, and then we keep that height, but
Right.
communities sort of like with the geese. Sort of.
Okay. Yeah. And I think each community is unique, and that's how we look at it too. Each community is going to have their own challenges. So there's not always a one direction that fits all. So it is going to depend for different communities. Here's another picture, just enhancement, different vegetation. That's very much what we want. This one's got a lot of the pickerel weed, but extensive buffers through here. And we want clean water leaving the project, which is the goal. So again, enhancement, definitely we're looking for you guys to exceed regulations and be stewards, and we want clean water going into our waterways. So again, this is a dry facility. That pond meadow keeps the soils more porous and also creates some pollinator habitat. So on our website, we have lots of resources. Siobhan, who is here, is the person who has put all of this together. So she gets all the credit for our website, but she has done an amazing job, because like all the videos, there's all kinds of videos, everything is up here. Lots of homeowner resources. What else am I forgetting?
Keep going, there's more stuff in there.
Okay. Fact sheets that she's created.
And the swale fact sheet explains the roadside swales and the.
Yes. So our swale fact sheet here explains the different types of roadside swales, bioswales, kind of gives like who you contact, which is not us. And then turf grass, and I think John's talking about this. So, okay. This is a great presentation that's coming, and a fact sheet on turf grass management, because we all know that over irrigation is a problem. So, and then you can receive our newsletter by putting your information. There's a place to log in. And then we've got these great website or signs that are posted, which Siobhan brought one over there by her. It has a QR code. When you click the QR code, it takes you to a section of our website that talks about the importance of buffers. And it really goes into, if you have a grassed open space area and you go to meadow in the stormwater world is equivalent to woods. So an area has the least amount of runoff as are woods and meadows. So even going from a grass to a meadow condition, like if you have mowed grass to a meadow, you have significantly reduced runoff, depending on the soil type, from leaving that area. So upcoming events, did you want to talk about that? You want me
Do you want me to close out?
Yes.
Or so you got to thank you at the end, but.
Okay.
So October 9th, we have our turfgrass fertilizer BMP workshop. So I think with Delaware Livable Logs, there's been some updates. And so John will cover them, and he's super in depth. And I think the recording from his one workshop might be on our website.
Yes.
Don't quote me. So you can register for that on our website. And November 20th, we have enhancement and funding. I think Ben Coverdale's in here somewhere. and he's gonna be speaking at that one.
Oh, the 20th.
And he's gonna.
Okay.
So,
Got it. Okay. All right, upcoming events
yeah,
or
so-
conservation stewardship.
It's not completely out yet, but, there's 2 awards in the room for our Conservation Stewardship Award that previous winners have received. So in early October, we'll have our entry forms available. So there's design team, developer, HOA. What else is there? CCR. So different people in the stormwater world who were going above and beyond the regulations to improve natural resources across our state county. So we want to recognize them for the work that they're doing. You know, nobody else is doing that. So if you are interested in entering and highlighting your project, and we make videos for all of our winners too, which I love. You can check them out on our website. If you want to go to the next one.
Okay, so thank you guys very much. If you have questions, my business card is over there, so feel free to email me too. And do you have a question?
I just have one last question.
Okay.
On the, when you show the catch basin between properties and sometimes the silt is still there, so we gotta wait for the silt to be removed. And you said that might not come till the end of the project, but if you have a large development, and let's say where those catch basins are on those properties that go back to back,
Mhm.
they've been completed. So nothing
Yeah.
else is going there, but the silt is still there, so now they're getting like a lot of issues. Well, that whole area's been done, the builders.
It should come out. Yeah. So
Way
you
to
don't,
enforce that though, to get the builder to do it, because
Yeah.
they keep hearing next month, and now
Right.
they keep complaining, rightfully so. But is there something,
so they're not supposed to remove it until we give them the green light. Now, if there are sections of a development that are completed, they can pull the inlet protection. And so if you are in a community where you think a section of, is done, you can send us an email and we can talk to them about, hey, just pull the inlet protection in these particular areas.
okay, send
Yeah.
you an email?
Yep, you can send me an email and then I'll kick it to the inspector for the project or the developer and we'll try to get it addressed. Yep, sure. Yes,
Free to share with us the name of the community that, has the beekeepers,
Tower Hill in Lewis. Tower Hill,
Tower Hill.
yeah, so they worked with us and Extension.
And they have a video from
Yes,
last year.
they won last year for the development. So you can look at the website and development, but before they broke ground, or actually very early in the construction process, they met with Extension and us and I think tributaries as well, about what they wanted to do for plantings out there. And they have extensive meadows. They've done a great job.
Yeah, I know you're gonna have questions, but I can wrap you guys up and then we can do questions.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay,
we
yeah.
got like 5 minutes on our timer. So on our agendas here, we have a survey. You will be getting that this afternoon from me. So we would love if you could give us some feedback and fill that out. Should be super short, like 5 minutes. Nutrient management credits, if you need those, the sign-in sheet is over there. And conservation stewardship board, we already talked about that.
Yep. So the conservation stewardship, are we in our fourth year?
Fourth.
Fourth year. So really, we talked about, developers and communities just have to meet the regulations, but we want to incentivize, we want you to go above and beyond,
There's a lot that have, and we
Oh,
want to
yeah.
show.
showcase that and educate.
Your neighbors are doing great things too.
That's true. Like we would get these applications from people who were submitting for their project. We had no idea they were doing these extensive plantings. That we had one community that won the first year. I think they had everybody buy a tree and they did
Over 80 trees, I think, planted in the first year.
Yep, and so and I don't know if they picked they luckily had a landscape architect that lived in their community, but I mean, you can also work with the Master Gardeners program on different trees, native trees, there's lots of resources.
Another tree club.
Okay, yes,
On October 12th, we have a native tree giveaway as part of the Tree for Every Delawarean initiative. We will have over 700 trees available. All of the species and quantities are on our website. If you go to our events page. We will be releasing information on traffic flow and all that, because we're gonna try to accommodate 700 people.
so
And
we
give
did
them
this,
all trees.
so last year we did this, but we had 200 trees, 11 minutes, they were gone in 11 minutes.
So that's why 700 is a little bit of a daunting number right now.
Yes, right, so she is figuring out
Just
traffic, yes, traffic flow, so it's gonna be interesting,
It'll be fun.
yeah.
No, that information is on our website. It's gonna be at our district office.
And there will be a traffic pattern on that, so just make sure. And what Siobhan's plan is, you won't be getting out of your car, so, right, isn't that right, Siobhan? We will be loading the tree up and you will be going,
We get
yes,
it for you to look.
Yes.
We're not gonna be putting it in.
yeah, so there will be directions on the website,
Once they're finalized.
yep. So were there other questions? Yes,
So we have dry ponds.
Okay.
3, and I think there's a creek that also runs along the boundary of our community, which we're told that we may have some ownership in. Should we be maintaining a creek also? I mean, it gets,
what's your community?
it's the woods, it's the woods at Seaside.
Okay, was it Seaside? I haven't been there in forever.
Yeah.
So, that was early 2000s. I remember that.
Yeah.
So, was it Seaside? So I think you do, actually, one of those pictures is from your community. One of
What,
the,
the good ones or the bad ones?
no, it was a before and after picture, was of an erosion that they went back and fixed with TRM.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, for you guys, you do not have to maintain the creek. So your stormwater responsibility are just those stormwater facilities.
Should anybody be maintaining the creek? I mean, it's always got
Yeah, we've heard.
trash and
Our-
it's gross.
Our inspector, and this is a really good question. So our inspector has met with, I think, is it the Food Lion or Giant?
It's giant.
It's Giant. So, and the Senior Living Center.
Brandywine, yeah.
Yes. So like, I think he was meeting with everybody, trying to get them to pick up the trash. And I just don't think anybody was paying the bill. But if there was a way to collectively get people to do it, and I don't know how you do that, but I know that he had reached out to the Giant and stuff, but yeah.
So it's not ours, so.
It
okay.
is not yours, but I think everybody's like, not mine, not mine.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
The property line is in the middle of the creek.
Oh,
Does that
okay.
make a difference to you?
No, I mean, you don't, it's your stormwater responsibility is just the ponds, to where the pipe is. So this is kind of a different animal, but what would be a really good project if we could get people to do a cleanup. So, we'll probably need to talk about that more. I think yes.
You know, just wondered if you have a recommendation where to get riprap?
Ooh, where to get riprap? I do not.
Recycling materials.
Yeah, that's right. Stokely, Stokely,
I was just wondering, maybe you had a pile in the back of your building.
oh, yeah.
Signed for jobs already.
Yeah. So we do have an equipment program, but that's usually designated. The only thing that we do sell is pipe. So we do sell, plastic pipe, the HDPE pipe. Yep. So that is, yes.
You talked a lot about erosive flow and flashy storms, and you guys managed the 1 in 100-year storm. A lot of jurisdictions have stepped up to go to 1 in hour storm, the 100-year in hour storm. So is there going to be 9 inches if it's a day and an hour is the 3-inch storm? Because that causes a lot of erosive flow and volume and velocity problems. Are you guys looking at changing that? Or giving
So-
yourself
Regulation.
Yeah. So the regulations are, everything's designed for 2, 10, and 100. So when they run stormwater calculations, but everything is predicated on a 24-hour storm event. So the water quality storm, and I'm simplifying this, but they look at, like the 1 year would be 3.4 inches in 24 hours. The 10-year would be 5.4, I think it's 5.4, 5.3 in 24 hours, and then the 100-year. So each one, they look at each one of those storm events.
There's no interest in, because I know Maryland's moving on this, Pennsylvania and Virginia are all moving because they're missing the flooding and ponding issues, which is what triggers a lot of calls, is that the flooding or ponding is where it shouldn't be, but it wasn't the 100-year, 24-hour storm.
Yeah. Right. So I would say at this point, no. But everything is predicated on the 2, 10, and 100-year design storms. Yep. Anybody else? That's it?
We're
Okay.
at time.
Okay.
So-
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you talk a little bit about possible grants? One I've heard about is Pragmity mediation. Is that a real thing? Where do we find that?
Yeah, I don't know anything. Do you guys, anybody know from the companies? I think the state used to have grant funding for Pragmites. I don't think that's anymore. Does anybody know?
Yeah, I think Kent County is a little easier to get that.
Kent County, Delaware? Around Delaware, okay. So we do not, in Sussex, there's nothing through the conservation district, and Denrick used to do it back in the day, but I don't think it's something that has funding anymore. But, and then funding in regards to, they're
Like
gonna talk about,
enhancement and stuff, so our November 20th workshop will cover like watershed-based funding.
Mhm.
So there are different funding options for different watersheds, or, you know, community and urban forestry has different programs, so.
Maybe we can talk about, we can't come to the October 20th session, how we learn about that.
The November 20th, so I think we're gonna try and record those as well.
and they'll all be here. So there'll be the same videoing and all of this will be made available. Yes.
Yes, I have a question. How does the tax ditch program, or whatever it's called, tax structure, how does that interrelate with your assessment conservation district?
So, so tax ditches are ditches that were dug, I don't know, back in the
They're
forties.
Mental subdivision of the state.
Yeah, so I think they started maybe in the forties and they were forties, fifties, and they were dug by the Conservation District, our equipment program, years and years ago, so that they could farm the land. So basically these ditches, and not every ditch that you see is a tax ditch. So there's maps that show the tax ditches and the watershed of the tax ditch and the right of way of the tax ditch. So they're almost like a stormwater utility kind of thing, but DENREC oversees it. And there's tax ditch, each tax ditch, has a manager, a treasurer, a secretary, and then they collect funding every year. People who live in a tax ditch watershed, they pay taxes. And those fees go to the long-term maintenance of that tax ditch. So some people live in communities that are in the tax ditch watershed and you pay a tax for the maintenance of that tax ditch.
Right, but is there, as that land moves from prairie moves to a subdivision, is part of the review of that site plan, is it fall under your domain to make sure that that tax ditch is properly engineered to meet its new needs? It's no longer going to be a farmer's field.
Right.
It's going to be a person's backyard.
Right.
How is that addressed?
Yeah, so what happens is when a community comes in, they have a pre-application meeting. If they're in a tax ditch watershed, we invite DENREC drainage section who oversees the tax ditches. So they participate in the early design of the project and they tell them, hey, look, these are the issues with the tax ditch. It's going to need maintenance. You're going to need a court order change. So they're involved from day one. And then we review the project for compliance with state regulations. It discharges to a tax ditch. Drainage section, who has authority over the tax ditches, they review it as well to make sure that they can accept the flows, that it's meeting pre-development. They're looking at how they're entering the tax ditch, whether the tax ditch had to be relocated. So DENREC drainage section oversees that. But there's coordination between our office and their office.
And so if that water that's conveyed in the tax ditch moves to a stormwater management pond that falls into your domain, that is, I should be reassured or that has been considered.
It should have already, so the stormwater facility will drain into the tax ditch. We do have a couple cases.
No, the other way around.
The tax ditch drains into, so we only have a couple communities that have that, like two. So, I mean, it doesn't really, so drainage section had to approve that before it got approved. So if a tax ditch flows through that stormwater facility and then the pond is in the middle and then the pond discharges to the tax ditch, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm speaking of a tax ditch that flows to a stormwater management pond.
Okay, so we only have like two communities where a tax ditch flows into a stormwater facility. Most of the time it's flowing out. It's flowing to it. It's managed in the pond and then it discharges to the tax ditch.
Right. Well, the one that you showed is an example of an outstanding stormwater management pond, and you described it as pilot town. I'm very familiar with
Yeah,
that.
that discharges to a tax ditch.
There, the tax ditch is discharged into that stormwater management pond.
Okay.
And there are also municipal drainage systems that also drains into that same, into the tax ditches, which also drains into that stormwater management pond.
Okay. So drainage section was involved in all of that.
And that's, they're all in the DENREC.
Yep.
I
Yep.
see.
So there's coordination between both of our offices.
See,
Yep,
thank you.
sure. Anybody else? Well, thank you guys very much for being here.
I want to thank UD for having us and recording it.
Yes.
We will try and make the recording available as soon as it's available to us. And thank you to our vendors for coming. You know, hopefully you had a chance to network with them. I think that's it.
Okay.
Join us.
Great. Yep, if you still have questions, we'll be here. Thank you, guys.